and were followed by the parlor's ornate Persian rug. As in the parlor, so in the rest of the Mason house. Once the finest home in all of Lowell, now it was grand on the outside alone. The only sticks of furniture that remained inside were Dovey's bed and her father's, and a small plain table with 2 chairs where they took their skimpy meals. Father had even begun prizing the plaster molding from the edges of the ceilings. The plaster would bring in some money. Not much, but every penny was a fortune in these dark days. Dovey swallowed the hard lump in her throat. "It's a good thing, after all, that Mother fell ill," she told herself stoutly. If Mother hadn't gone off to Boston last May to live under the care of her second cousin, a nurse who had done plenty of work with consumptives and knew just how to bring them back to health, then her heart would surely break now to see her once fine home reduced to bare planks and lathing. It would be the death of her, to watch her world torn up and sold off, piece by piece. The war ground on and showed no signs of ending. Dovey could bear the sight of this carnage, of the Mason family being crushed first to rubble and then to dust. But Mother would never have been able to bear it, and Dovey thanked God for sparing her the terrible sight. It was, however, a cruel enough prank on God's part that all 3 of Dovey's brothers had been sent off to fight the Confederates. From there, divine malice had only escalated. Last spring, when they'd received word that John, the eldest, had been killed at Chancellorsville, the news was enough to drop Mother into a faint. She never had recovered from that shock. In fact, she had grown paler and weaker by the day, and when Father finally sent word to the Boston cousin and hustled Mother away, Dovey had her doubts whether the move had been for Mother's good or for Father's. Everyone knew that consumption was an illness of the poor. If word got around Lowell that Mary Mason had gone consumptive, well, that would be all the proof anyone needed that John Mason Sr. was no longer the lord of the factories. To Father, Mother's illness seemed a presentiment, or a judgment from God. It was a portent of the fall to come, of his long, slow, unremitting slide into poverty. Of course, John Mason had not forestalled the inevitable by sending his wife away. In fact, Dovey rather suspected he might have hastened his own downfall. Dovey was only 16, but she was wise enough to perceive that a mere man, even a very rich one, couldn't hornswoggle the Almighty with a trick as simple as stashing his consumptive wife away. God was a mite too clever to fall for such a trick. The sunset's glow sent a pallid flush creeping over the windowsill, lighting the skirt of Dovey's green dress as if to emphasize its expensive fabric, the uselessness of her finery. She refused to look around the parlor, refused to see the warm light playing upon the unadorned walls. As the house's walls grew barer, Dovey felt them closing in around her, squeezing with a terrible pressure that fuddled her up so badly she didn't know from one minute to the next whether she wanted to cry or scream. She had hoped that if she could find work, she might contribute to the family's needs, ease some of the burden from her father's shoulders, and slow the disassembly and sale of the only life she had ever known. But what work could Lowell offer a girl of 16? None but the mills. And the mills, as Father knew all too well, were rapidly closing. Dovey turned her head sharply at the slow, dejected tread of footsteps on the stairs. She adjusted the high lace collar of her dress and smoothed the pleats of her green woolen skirt, then fixed a bright smile to her face as Father entered the parlor. His coat was carelessly unbuttoned, and the fringe of dark hair that ringed his bald pate was flattened and disheveled, as if he'd been napping and had only just rolled from his bed. His heavy mustache drooped from the corners of his mouth.
"Doreen, where have you been? I looked for you this morning, but you were nowhere in the house."
I went out, sir." She clutched her hands more tightly behind